Before we get started, I just have to take a minute to thank each one of my generous patrons for your part in keeping this podcast going. I could not continue to do it without you, so thank you so much. If you're not a patron yet, but you love the show and you listen regularly, please consider becoming a patron. It's really easy to do and it doesn't have to break the bank. Just head over to theundrapedartist.com and click on the link Be My Patron on Podbean. And then choose a monthly donation amount that fits your budget. It's that simple. And to thank you for your generous donations, once you've reached $100 in total contributions, send me an email to theundrapedartist@gmail.com and I will send you one of our spectacular Undraped Artist aprons. Thank you again for your support. Thank you for watching and listening. Hope you enjoy the episode. Lucas Bononi, welcome to the Undraped Artist Podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Jeff.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm a huge fan. So I'm really excited to kind of figure out how you think and what motivates you and stuff. But first of all, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into the art field, maybe a little bit about your past, your education, and so on.
Yeah, well, I started really early on. I started taking art classes when I was a little kid, and my mom used to teach a summer art camp, so I would join the other kids there. And at some point, I wanted to get a little bit more serious, and it was at a really young age. So at 7 years old, my mom had to sign a waiver uh, for me to take nude figure drawing classes because I
What?
was under the age of 18.
At 7 years old?
Yeah, yeah. So she signed this waiver. I'm taking,
Wait. Don't wait. Okay.
yeah.
But why, how does a 7 year old even know about nude figure drawing classes? And how does a 7 year old come to have that desire? There's got to be more to this story.
Yeah, I was just always obsessed with the old great masters, and I was doing master copies. And one time I even got in trouble in elementary school because they said you can't be drawing these figures. And my mom got really upset. She was like, how could you try to suspend a kid that is just doing master copies of Leonardo da Vinci? Yeah.
Okay, this you might have taken the cake on this one because I have never heard anything like this. So at 7 years old, you're in school copying Leonardo da Vinci nudes and other old master nudes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I got in trouble for it, and she said, "No, he takes this really serious. You gotta let him do this type of artwork." And so then I was taking the figurative classes. I was studying the old great masters. And at the time, living in Los Angeles, I'm from Los Angeles. I was also doing a little bit of acting on the side. And the biggest role I had was just being an extra in Magnolia with Tom Cruise.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
yeah, and I was 9 years old by then. And I said to my parents, I want to quit acting because it's distracting me from art, from visual arts, and I want to just be a
At
painter.
9 years old.
At 9 years old. And I never changed my mind. I tried all sorts of different things that I really loved, but I never was as passionate as, my passion for painting. So I continued my studies on the side. I was never sort of in this rigor of working every day because I was a student in school, in high school and middle school and all. But when I got to high school, I was starting to take weekend classes at Pasadena Art Center, and that's when I felt I was getting more serious, and from there. I was in community college, and with that, I used the credits to study abroad in Italy. Then I studied in Buenos Aires. Then I ended up in San Francisco, where I got my BFA. And then I ended up in New York, where I went to an atelier for 4 years. So it was a lot of studying. It was 11 years of studying that
11
I
years. Not
11
not
years nonstop.
including your classes as a 7-year-old and through high school.
Yeah, not including that. Just right out of high school from 2010 till 2021, I was full time nonstop. Like no breaks. All gas, no breaks.
Wow. 11
Yeah.
years. That's awesome. Man, I hope my students hear this because occasionally I'll get a student come in and they're a beginner and they'll say, "Look, I've got 2 years to become a professional artist. So we got to get cracking here." And I'm like, "2 years? That's insanity. There's no way." So it's great that you put in that much time and I mean cuz it really takes a lot of time to get to a high level.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I'm still learning and I'm still researching and like investigating all these sorts of concepts not only with technique but just what art means to us as individuals. And through all through all the studying that I did, I found that everyone works differently, even if it's within the same category of realism, let's say. Everyone is working completely different, both in the atelier world, and in, the impressionist world or uh, the university setting. Everyone is working so different from each other. We all are expressing virtuosity in some sort of way in the category of realism, but I do find that we have our own unique voice of expressing it. And I thought that going to an atelier meant that I was going to become a robot or something.
Yeah.
That I was going to be like a clone. And when I went there, I recall there was like a teacher demo, and every instructor worked in completely different mediums, completely different styles. And I said, "Whoa, this is so much different than I thought it would be." And I was warned that I was going to become, this sort of artist that's going to be isolated in a little bubble and forget what expression is all about in
Yeah.
and your. But it really wasn't what I found was the case. I really found that uh, studying in these different sort of fields and schools led up to who I am today. And I do feel like I did it sort of out of order. Like I
Mhm.
was with more like an impressionistic kind of style, and then later I did atelier, and I wanted to really focus on foundations. So I do feel like I did it out of order, but in the way that I did it out of order, I was able to hold on to my voice and understand what I want to say with all of this.
Hmm. So what atelier did you attend?
So I went to a Grand Central Atelier for
Okay.
4 years,
Okay.
and I went to, prior to that, I went to Academy of Art University in San Francisco for 5 years.
Wow. So, I mean, how much did going to the institute in San Francisco affect your outlook on art now that you've been through the atelier, though? Do you think you would have ended up where you're at now if you had just gone to Grand Central Academy?
No, no, I don't feel that way. I feel like I would have really been honed into a very rigid approach and probably would be too scared to experiment and go outside of my comfort zone. I would most likely be doing what I feel is safe and setting up the figures in a sort of way and composing in a sort of way. I mean, really, um, the way that they work is from natural light and from life. and we weren't allowed to work from photos. So it would have really changed who I am today if I would have only been an atelier.
Hmm.
I would have the sort of tools to understand that art can be made in so many different ways. I love working from life or from photos. I I like mixing them. I'm doing a painting right now where I'm painting flowers from life that are dried, and it allows me to paint them like if they're like a cast.
Mm-hmm.
So doing this sort of cast painting of flowers, let's say, because they're dried and they're not moving. But at the same time, my reference is a photo reference that is collaging the these flowers with other sort of elements. So
Hmm.
I'm painting both from photo and from life, and I'm juxtaposing them together so that I can sort of feel a three-dimensional character inside of the collage that can break the picture plane a little bit, but then also have flatter elements and also sort of end up with a piece that allows me to experiment and take risks. I I do feel like there's this sort of way of working in the atelier setting where you just put the thing in front of you and you start painting.
All right.
And I find that it's very admirable to take a study all the way to the finish and really get something amazing out of it. But I do find that as artists, we need to play. We need to be playful. You know, if we're sort of butting our head against the wall because we're not succeeding at making something virtuous enough, and like the plane, like the way that the picture plane is expressed is on the static side of things, I just feel like it can suck the life out of what we're here for and why we make art. I feel like we make art because of culture.
Yeah.
We're sort of contributing to culture and beauty and we're being playful, and in the playfulness the spectator can feel the joy inside of the layers of paint and want to have that joy, collected.
Yeah, yeah. So you said that when you went to Grand Central Academy, you felt like there was a diversity in styles and diversity in technique, but yet you also said that you don't think you'd be as expressive of a painter if you hadn't gone to other institutions. And
Yeah.
I have to admit the reason I wanted to interview you is because you don't look like you came out of an atelier. So I have to admit that I buy into that stereotype too, because I would argue that 90% of people coming out of ateliers look like they came out of an atelier, whereas you don't. If I had not known that you went to Grand Central Academy, I mean, I did know because I've been following you, but I would, I mean, I wouldn't have guessed it. So, I mean, maybe you could speak to that a little bit more. And I'm curious how you broke the mold, so to speak.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, first off, I really admire your work,
Oh, thank you.
and I I was able to see it in person for the first time in 2017 because we were actually in a group show together and we were hung uh, very
Oh, what
close to
was
each other.
that?
It was ARC in 2017, and I flew in for that show because I had been living in the West Coast, and I went up to your painting, and there was like a rim lighting that was like fluorescent pink around.
Oh, that was of Juju, that
So
little portrait of Juju. Yeah.
yeah, the little portrait of Juju, and I'm looking at that, and I was just like, whoa! I was mind blown.
No, thank you.
Yeah, like that fluorescent color and how vivid, and like I spent more time looking at that painting than anything else. It was just really breathtaking, and yeah, so actually since then I've been a huge fan, and before then of course, but when I saw your work in person I was like, whoa.
Oh,
So
thanks. I appreciate that.
yeah, yeah, but I definitely feel like that work is like I mean, in an atelier setting, it's like, wow, like that's fluorescent.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I feel that I like I was mentioning earlier, I've never really changed my mind on becoming a painter one day. I always sort of had this idea that I wanted to be a painter. And at the same time, I feel like I also knew in a way who I wanted to be. And I wanted to add tools to my toolbox to be that person. And and so even though I was going through all these different schools of thought, I never fell in to the schools of thought as a sort of servant
Right.
to school, but more as like I'm gonna grab what they're preaching and I'm gonna put it in my toolbox and like really figure out how that can contribute to the type of art that I want to make. Now, as a student, I really wanted to follow what they were instructing. I find that any sort of student out there that's being more let's say rebellious and saying like, well, the teacher said to do this, but I like to do it this way. I really find like
Yeah.
you don't get it. You
No,
don't get it.
no. What's the
So
point of going to school if you're going to have that attitude?
exactly. Yeah. So I really wanted to really understand what they were preaching and go full throttle with that what that was. And I mean, to the extent that I'm actually an instructor now in Grand Central Atelier, and I'm teaching the core program because I have like an obsession to the way that we could truly create form and truly create light and color and have it express those three-dimensional qualities. Like I really nerd out on these types of things. Yeah, like the books I read are always scientific books on like physics and stuff, and I'm like always asking these really nerdy questions. So
Oh
I
man,
felt
that's funny. We got a lot in common.
I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy we have that in common. It's so important to understand why conventions are made.
Yeah.
And then also, not shut the door on conventions, but investigate like scientifically why something works and why the convention was made, and you can pick and choose, oh, for this I want to use a convention, and for this I want to really think of it academically. And
Mm-hmm.
I,
Mm-hmm.
I just really find that it opens doors, like it really opens doors. Um, and I really did feel that just going to this type of setting where I could nerd out all the way, I understood just how much I knew about painting. It was very little. I really knew so little about how the world works when I first moved to New York and wanted to pursue this sort of academic approach. So to rewind a little bit, when I was studying abroad, I was studying in Florence. And of course, in the Atelier world, everyone's asking me, "Oh, so you studied at Florence Academy?" And I said I actually was in a not so well known school, doing abstract painting,
You
and
were, no way.
yeah, so I was doing abstract painting and installation, and my master copies back then were of like Gustav Klimt and Egon Schiele,
Oh
and I
man.
really,
Awesome.
yeah. Um, and my, I remember my dad saying, "You should be doing your foundations," and me saying, "Why would I do my foundations if I'm gonna be an expressive painter?" And I find that to this day, people are asking me that same question that I asked myself, like, why would I do this? Um, that I was telling my parents. And I find that I'll always tell them no matter how loose you want to be or how expressive you want to be or how abstract you want to be, it's so important to learn the foundations. So important. I mean, imagine you're trying to be expressive and you don't have those tools to make the moments that you want to be truthful actually truthful. It shows through the paint. It really, we're visual artists, so like we really depict our knowledge on our surface. So I found that when I did the foundations, I understood that I really didn't know what I was thinking back then, because it is so important to understand how to truly make something feel tangible and like it's going to pop out of the canvas, and at the same time use that to your advantage. And if someone wants to be abstract, um, it doesn't necessarily mean that they want to be abstract forever. What
Yeah.
if 20 years down the line, they're like, I actually want to put some real elements into my work, or I want to get a little bit tighter. I've seen it happen before. Usually it's reversed, right? Usually the artist is tighter and then loosens up over the years, but I've seen it reversed. And in a I saw a solo exhibition in Manhattan where I said, "Wow, I barely recommend recognize this artist. He's doing everything in reverse. He was expressive 10 years ago, and now he's really tight." And those are the types of things that you can sort of reconstruct, reinvent. You could take things apart and put them back together. You're completely limitless. So if anything, when someone says, I want to be expressive because being realistic is limiting it, I feel it's the reverse. I feel
Hmm.
like the lack of knowledge is limiting, and so you should explore all avenues and have the options rather than being funneled into just one approach because of your means of education.
Hmm. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And you're not the first one on the podcast to address that issue either. I mean, I think many of us agree with that. So, but I hate to go backwards, but I just can't get this out of my mind. So, I want to know more about your parents because, first of all, at 7 years old, and I want to know a little bit more about where you were at then too. And
Mhm.
because at 7 years old, um, first of all, I didn't even know what an old master was at 7 years old. I literally didn't know who Da Vinci was or Michelangelo was or any Rembrandt was. So that's
Yeah.
one. I don't understand how you could have been doing master copies when many of us didn't even know what an old master was. All we knew about was where the playground was located. And
Right.
that's the first thing I'd love to hear more about. But also that your father, one, that your parents were so supportive to the degree that they signed this waiver and then supported you going all over the world and studying, but also that your father had the wisdom to tell you to go do or study the fundamentals. I mean, tell me a little bit more about your parents. What kind of people are they, and how did they know to be so supportive of this?
Yeah, yeah, they were extremely supportive. And I'm really grateful for that because I always hear stories about artists that struggled with that. Parents that wanted them to be a doctor or a lawyer and
Yeah,
how
that's
dare
me.
you become an artist? Oh yeah.
Yeah, although my parents didn't think I had the potential to be a doctor or lawyer, but they wanted me to be something like a garbage man or something. Not that there's
Something more
anything wrong with
logical.
that. No, there's anything wrong with that.
Right, yeah,
Yeah,
something more logical.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, a more logical 9 to 5 kind of thing.
Right. Secure. Something more secure.
Exactly. Well, so my dad, he was an architect, and I find that that's probably why he wanted me to do the foundations. He was very strict, very mathematical, like really knew sort of how to make the structure and the foundation of the houses he was
Mm.
sort of designing, or he was designing all sorts of things in Los Angeles. But I find that that's probably where it came from is because he was an architect, he most likely wanted me to have a foundation and a structure
Okay.
and build on that.
So
Um,
he was an
my
artist in his
mom,
own right as an architect.
oh
He,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. He was an artist in his own right for sure, and he was drawing plans hand drawn before AutoCAD, and he was also doing little paintings on the side.
Okay.
So he was definitely an artist. I really saw him as an artist. I saw like watercolors of houses he did, and I said, yeah, this he would try to say that he wasn't in a
Mm-hmm.
way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you read any art history book, and when they dive into everything that Leonardo da Vinci was doing or Michelangelo, you're like, yeah, they were an architect, an inventor, an artist.
Mm-hmm.
They were everything.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're subcategorizing uh, architects and illustrators and animators, and it almost feels like everything is completely different. But back then, it was all one.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I always saw him as an artist, and then my mom, she like I was saying earlier, she taught in an art camp. So she had a little school, and every summer she would do an art camp, and I would join them.
Oh,
And
okay. Yeah.
yeah, so she was teaching art to the kids, and I had like an infinite supply of art materials because she had all the art materials because the art camp was in our house, right? So
Oh,
every
okay.
summer, yeah,
So you
every summer
grew
the
up in an art school, basically, in a little art
yeah,
school.
it was basically an art school. Like half of our house was an art school, and the other half was our house. And so the kids were there, and it was like a preschool, right? And they had art class there. And then in the summer, it was just completely just art school. And
Hmm.
so I had that opportunity to use all these different materials and play around with them. And even, even as a teenager, I found that I would go into that art school and like get some materials and make some artwork and put it back in the art school.
Hmm.
So it was really it was really nice how they were supportive and at the same time they appreciated painting and drawing. And so they would take me to the Getty Museum and the LACMA and the Hammer Museum and all these different museums in Los Angeles. And I was pretty I was pretty spoiled in that regard because I was like, oh yeah, all parents are really supportive, but yeah, that's not the case most of the
Mm-mm.
time, or at least half of the time. It's really hard to get support from parents when it has to do with making art because it doesn't feel like a feasible sort of profession. But no, yeah, there I was in the Getty, like once a month. I was going to the Getty with my mom and my family, and I found that at a very early age, I was drawn to Rembrandt. So there's a portrait there, um, and it's called something like Laughing Rembrandt. It's a self-portrait by Rembrandt where he's laughing, and it's a small painting, and it's just amazing. I mean, to this day, it's one of my favorite paintings.
Hmm.
These uh like pink zones in the cheeks and these like yellow zones in the forehead and then there's like these dull grays and Rembrandt's laughing and I mean the painting is such a little gem that not a lot of people know about because it's really tiny. I think it's something like 12 by 16 or
Hmm.
11 by 14. So it's just this little tiny gem that allows you to peek into the brain of Rembrandt because it felt like it was done quickly, but just right. So you're able to see how his brain was working or, probably developing the painting all the way to a finish. So it's right at the in between where you're saying, "Oh, I could see his decisions." And and that openness about it made it feel also really contemporary. Like when you look at that painting, you really can't tell from what era it was made. It could have been painted 5 years ago.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting you say that because in 2008, from 2008 to 2011, I quit selling paintings for 3 years to kind of switch my style. I was tired of what I was doing, and I was one of those artists that went tighter and then decided I wanted to
Yeah.
be more of a classical painter. And I spent some time going back and forth to LA to see paintings like that one, including that one,
Mm.
and really get in the head of Rembrandt. And I would look at the Rembrandt paintings because I agree with you. I mean, I'm with you in that he was one of my favorites as well. I'd look at
Yeah.
the Rembrandt paintings, then I'd come home and I would try and mimic what I saw, and then I'd go back and I'd figure out what I had done wrong, and then I'd come home and try and mimic what I saw. I mean, these trips were years, months, and years apart, but still, I'm with you. It was he's such an amazing painter and a huge influence.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and here at the Met, I'm able to see there's like a sort of salon inside of the Met where they have his artworks and they that are I feel like they're perfectly chronological order because I could really see sort of earlier Rembrandt where his technique is flawless and like it's going from like the transparent thin washes to like the thicker but not so thick like later Rembrandt. So you're really able to like see this kind of academic portrait that's really well done. And then as you walk along, you're able to see he's getting a little bit looser and a little bit thicker. And then by the time you're at sort of the middle of the salon, it's like really thick. He's like globbing the paint on there, and it really feels like he sort of was trying to reinvent what texture meant in the world, and how it could be used as a sort of sculptural element to also depict the way light falls in a painting. So, and to be honest, I stare at the academic one because I'm like, oh, the academic ones, those are the ones where I can really understand sort of what is underneath all of these layers of paint and thick globs in the later works. The later works, it's expressive enough to where you're like, how was he thinking? I don't understand how he was thinking. It's all hidden under these globs
Hmm.
of paint texture, and it's all under there. So yeah, I find like his earlier works I could really explore that. Um,
What's your favorite? His earlier work or his later work?
I would say, hmm, I that's that's tough to say. Um, I would say his earlier work.
Yeah, me
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
Yeah,
I would
me
say
too. A
his
lot
earlier
of people
work.
don't think that, but I remember there was an artist on Instagram that put that question out. I can't remember who it was now, and
Hmm.
I felt like some kind of a horrible human to say earlier work because I was so outnumbered.
Yeah,
I was like, is there something wrong with me? I don't know, but yeah, I prefer his earlier work as well. I mean, I love it all, but yeah,
yeah. I mean, well, for example, if we're talking about Turner, right? Turner's seascapes, I like his later work, I would say,
I agree with
rather
that
than
too.
his
Yeah.
earlier where it becomes so loose and so expressive that you're just seeing like a veil of high key white and these colors that are barely expressing the scene and something about it you're you're just left with the sort of mystery about the scene and how you want to resolve the scene yourself in your head and put the pieces together within like the misty fog of white. Whereas like his earlier work, it seems very illustrative of the scene, very sort of clear and straight to the point. And I find his later work, it's like a breath of fresh air. You look at it and
Hmm.
you're just like, I can find new things in this painting every time, and it's so mysterious how the use of white can like fog something up. Or on the flip side, if something's extremely dark, how it can mystify the work because everything's dark, like the Night Watch, by Rembrandt, for example. Like that's a very mysterious painting. But I find that um yeah, I mean with Monet also later works, I would say.
Yeah,
Uh
I haven't thought about Monet. I have to think about that. So I don't usually ask this question, but I'm really curious now that you've mentioned a few artists that you've both copied and clearly like. Is there any one or few artists that you're really influenced by in your work now?
yeah, yeah. I have this weird kind of way of thinking, I feel, where I love old masters, and then I also love like contemporary painters that are of the like abstract expressionist movement. So I'm like just loving both worlds so much that um I would say I really like the works of Lee Krasner. Um she was the wife of Jackson Pollock.
Hmm.
I'm not so much of a fan of Jackson Pollock's work, but Lee Krasner had this sort of like bubbly, rhythmic way of working. Like you could see these like beautiful, huge arabesques in the work that were composed just so nicely. And um, I also am drawn to installation artists. I really like the work of Donna Huanca. She's a living artist. She does installation work where she puts white sand in a gallery space and installation work that's made of different materials. And at the same time, she paints on top of models that are doing contemporary dance very slowly around the works, around the installations on the white sand. And when I'm looking for when I'm looking for some sort of inspiration, I find that of course of course we always are scrolling through Instagram and we're like, oh, I'd like to do that and I'd like to do that and there's so much like such an overstimulation of work out there, and sometimes we feel like we want to do it all.
Yeah, no
But
kidding.
yeah, but I do find that I'll sort of reminisce over the works of Lee Krasner. Joan Mitchell is another artist that I really admire. How she was using the white background and doing sort of the abstraction on top of the white background, and it was sort of opening like a new dimension where you can go into the white background of nothingness
Hmm.
and go behind the paint.
I want to look at,
Yeah.
let me pull up some of these artists. Donna Huanco. This is the sand artist.
Yeah, so you could see that the spaces have sand on the ground, and there's models that are doing very slow contemporary dance
Oh
around the
yeah, like
installation.
right here. Interesting.
hmm
And where did
Yeah.
you first see this work?
You know, I found her on the internet, and later on I was seeing her work in person, like in various art fairs, like Miami Art Basel or like Frieze, and I found that that her work is enjoyed in a gallery space, not in an art fair as much, because in an art fair they only have enough room to display her paintings, but they
Right.
don't have enough room to have the full experience with the painted models and the installation work, etc. So I do find that that if you see her work ever in person, probably on the opening where the whole sort of experience is demonstrated would be a good way to experience her work. Yeah, so
Hmm.
I have a sort of obsession of like of like looking through all like the different like painted models and seeing them as being three-dimensional because they're living, breathing human beings just with
Right.
abstraction on them. And I start to realize, like oh, I could sort of you know paint a figure and think of how a brushstroke that isn't so virtuous, a brushstroke that's a little more arbitrary in terms of color or in terms of value, how that would land on top of the form if it were to be part of this figure.
Right.
And I find that her work helps me sort of manifest that, where I'm seeing how the expression of the figure is three-dimensional because these are three-dimensional human beings, and
Mm-hmm.
how that can be done with paint. So I really like just how there's this very thin line between the two worlds of, are the models the painting, or is the installation the painting, or are the paintings the painting? They're all sort of the painting. They're all the experience.
Hmm.
And I like to think of that in my work. I like to think of how I can have three-dimensional abstraction, I can have flat abstraction, I can have areas that are really truthful, but I could also have areas that aren't truthful and that really can tell the viewer this is a painting.
Yeah.
And all different elements are sort of how my brain works.
Hmm.
And the other artists, that I mentioned, they're part of the abstract expressionist movement. I also love the work of Cecily Brown. Oh, you
Okay.
got
Let's
it. Yeah.
see. Yeah. Yeah.
So she's a living artist.
Yeah.
She's a figurative, yeah, so she's a figurative painter, and but I remember having this discussion like many years ago during my thesis, while I was doing my BFA, that there's sort of levels of abstraction, right? There's realism all the way to abstraction, and we were told to put a check mark where we feel we fall on this line between abstraction and realism. And I remember putting the check mark kind of like three-quarters towards abstraction.
Really?
So yeah. Um, but I don't feel like I'm kind of three-quarter. I feel like I'm kind of halfway, halfway between the two worlds. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I could see that. I could see three quarters too, because your figures are painted with an abstract surface. I don't know how else to put that. I'm kind of blown away with the influence of Donna Huanca. I mean, it's like you could smash her work into a flat plane, and
yeah,
it's very going to be very similar to what you're doing. Which I think that's a great. I think that's a cool thing. You've taken something three dimensional and made it your own on a two dimensional surface. But I never would have put that together if you haven't showed us that.
yeah, and I think also it's the appreciation towards working in a sculptural manner.
Yeah.
They had developed over the years in an academic setting, because really you could draw inspiration from so many places. Like I draw inspiration from fashion also,
Hmm.
like Jean Paul Gaultier fashion show late 80s, like from like so many different uh fashion runway of like Mugler. Like there's like so many different things out there where the figure is sort of used more like a prop rather than the main focus. And so like these fashion models, sort of look like aliens in a way, right? They're
Yeah.
like very tall, they look very exotic. Um, they don't look like regular people. And so like their beauty is in how exotic they look. So then these people that have these really unique features, they're sort of decorated with fashion and they're used as a sort of element to express the clothing rather than how a figurative painter or a portrait painter the main focus is the portrait or the main focus is the figure. I like to think of it as that the figure and the portrait can be used as an element to better express what you want to say. So then in the fashion world, the person as a prop I find to be really interesting because then you see how clothing is draping the figure in a sort of way that's not so common. And then you say, well, what if the clothing going across diagonally on that figure were to be a brushstroke? And then you're able to
Hmm.
see how the clothing is sort of wrapping around the figure and how a brushstroke can wrap around the figure and in a sort of way that's uncommon. So I'm looking at installation art, fashion shows. I like Donna Huanca so much because she's kind of meshing a lot of these ideas I have about art together. And
Mm-hmm.
then I also really enjoy like the other artists like Lee Krasner and Joan Mitchell just from the way that their compositions are made.
Okay, so this is this an example of Lee Krasner's work then?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You see how the arabesque plays a big role in her work. There's so much rhythm.
Yeah, I really, yeah, you've got great taste in abstract. I mean, that's subjective, of course, right? But I'm with
Yeah.
you on all this stuff. These are some great abstract artists that you've mentioned. You know what I think I'm drawn to in their work is that there's a formal quality to their work. It's not just chaos.
Hmm.
There's definitely
Like a
um
system
a system.
developed.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
I don't know why I need that in painting. It makes it feel more human and less random to me.
Right. Right. Yeah, like it's almost like a system that they had developed, and then in the exploration of that system, they start making sense of it and developing it and improving upon it.
Mm-hmm.
And what they made becomes the best version of who they are and what they came up with.
Yeah.
Which is the same with all the old great masters like Titian and Rembrandt and Velasquez. They're all extremely different from each other. Um, how Velasquez is sort of showing everything in a sort of optical manner, and the way that the air is also part of the composition in Velasquez, or how Titian is like very like um very monumentous and like very fluid and how it's like so dramatic and but then like we were talking about earlier like Rembrandt has his own way of sort of talking with texture.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is
So
Joan
there's
Mitchell.
Joan Mitchell. I wanted to pull her up as well. Yeah. Now Joan Mitchell I had heard of. And I also really like these abstract paintings. Man, yeah. These are great.
Yeah, and actually
I love that
Joan
one.
Mitchell she brings up something uh in my head actually. In my last solo exhibition in Manhattan, I had done a painting that utilized quite a bit of white background. And I just remember the owner asking me if the painting was finished or not, and I said it's finished. I finished it using white background as one of the parts of the painting that complete the painting. And I was like, if Joan Mitchell can do it, I can do it too.
Yeah. Which explains why the development of art has taken 500 years to get to where we're at. Because we all lean on the shoulders of those before us, and
Yeah,
because it does
yeah,
take courage to do these things, and the cavemen didn't have the guts or foresight to do what Joan Mitchell's doing. They had to kind of said the rest of the cavemen would have been making fun of them. Like, what's the matter with you? Can't you draw a goat? You know?
right.
But we've had to kind of work up the courage over the past 500 years of oil painting.
Yeah, yeah, we had to destroy the art idea of what is art and reinvent it. And when we get too good at reinventing it, we have to destroy it again. And it's like Duchamp's bicycle wheel, right?
Yeah.
Where he puts the wheel on top of the stool, taking the functionality out of the work, and it's left as just something to appreciate as beauty, and we rethink what it is. And a lot of the times when I'm painting, I like to rethink what beauty is. And I think maybe that's why I like to work with dried flowers sometimes, not only because it's kind of like working from a cast, but
Mm-hmm.
also um, someone can say that a dead rose is something ugly, but someone else can say that it's beautiful, like Sigmund Freud's Uncanny. I don't know if you've read that article before,
I
but
haven't.
Sigmund he talks about the uncanny, and it's a really interesting article to read because you understand how the ugly can be appreciated just as much as the beautiful, right? Like, I mean, for
Sigmund
anyone that
Freud, not Lucian Freud, but Sigmund Freud.
Sigmund Freud, yeah, Sigmund Freud talks about the ugly, about the
Huh.
uncanny. And it's really interesting because I almost feel like I've always been able to appreciate the grotesque just as much as the beautiful. And when I mix the grotesque with beauty, and sometimes I'll get weird feedback like, oh, why would you use that? Or this is a strange subject to use, and I'll just be like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. I just thought of it as all being beautiful. And I think a good example of that is Tim Burton, right? Like Tim Burton, I see so much beauty, but everything is actually kind of with an undertone of like some sort of demonic idea or some ugliness. But the ugliness is you could appreciate it in sort of like a celebration or in a naive way of like
Mm-hmm.
how like death could be beautiful in a
Mm-hmm.
way. Um, just how much like life can be beautiful. And so when I paint a still life, I like the painting I'm doing right now is with flowers that are dried, but also flowers that are living.
Hmm.
And I'm sort of I mesh them together.
Okay, so let's go to your Instagram account and look at those because I did see one. I think it was this one where it shows. Yeah, here we go.
Oh yeah, those are
Yeah.
dried
Is this the
sunflowers.
painting you're referring to?
Oh, I'm working like 6 or 7 paintings at the same time. I can physically grab it right now if you like.
Yeah, yeah, let's see it.
But
Let's see it. Let's see it.
yeah, so this is where I'm at right
Okay.
now.
Wow. And those are dead flowers too? Yeah, I guess they are kind of.
Yeah,
Man, that's
these
beautiful.
are they're all dead, and then this lime green one down here, um here.
Yeah, it's
This
hard. You're
lime
reversed. Yeah.
yeah, that lime green one is alive.
Okay.
I haven't finished it. I started that one last night.
Wow.
But yeah, so they're living flowers. They're flowers that are dried, and they're all mixed together. I would say because the flowers are done from life and that's what's taking the longest, uh, it's probably more of like, yeah, maybe like 3/4 of the time I'm spending more on like working from life, and the rest is from photography, like the other
Mm-hmm.
quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And the background is actually a broken subway screen.
What?
Because
Really?
yeah, in New York, a lot of the times they'll break the screens, and like the homeless will like break the screens and stuff.
Yeah.
And so there was a broken screen on the subway, and I took a photo of it because there was these really interesting purple and blue colors, and the crack that's coming out around radially is coming around radially around the dried uh, flower, and it's making it look like a saint. So
So
I'm
you're finding abstract imagery that happens arbitrarily in nature or in your environment. You're photographing it and copying it like a realist.
hmm
And so it
Yeah,
becomes an
yeah,
abstract painting that's actually executed from the perspective of a realist painting.
exactly. Because a broken pixelated screen with imagery that's distorted on it is going to be abstract to the point that we can't make out what it is. But I'm
Huh.
painting it truthfully, and then I'm collaging with real flowers and that I'm painting from life that are dried, and other flowers that I've photographed. So really, the whole thing becomes more of like a dialect between nature and technology, kind of talking to each other in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it becomes also loose enough to where I feel like I'm taking risks and I'm experimenting and being more playful. I find that if I were to just be painting flowers and a gray background, I I would probably go a little bit crazy. It'd
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
just spending too much time uh, figuring the scene out, figuring the qualities of the flower that make them feel really believable. And I find that my sort of break from doing something really believable is to then break free for a moment and then come back to it. So I'll be painting to the best of my ability and really try to make something tangible. And then I'll go really loose with maybe another flower or maybe with the background, and then I'll go back to that flower. And I have I have then fresh eyes. I have um, sort of taken my inner angst out on other parts of the painting, and then I like come back in, and I can now meditate again and really be in the moment with the subject, because
Mm.
the last thing I want to do is paint and uh, have some sort of inner struggle with the subject, because painting's hard. so
Yeah.
so so like and then that inner angst, it starts to get louder and louder and louder, and I find that the only way that I could quiet the inner angst is by freeing myself for a moment and then coming back, and like, so then I really feel like abstraction is a way of me to play and to have fun. I could take abstraction serious as well, but I do find that if if I'm making an abstract and I start getting serious with the abstract, then I'm saying, oh, I'm taking the fun out of it. Let me go back to the realism portions of this painting, and and I'm gonna have fun with that. And then when those realism portions get too serious, then I go to the abstraction. So I'm speaking these two different languages at all times, and the less I can develop the language, the more curiosity and the more curiosity, the more I can investigate and experiment and have fun. Um, don't get
Hmm.
me wrong, I spend a lot of time on each flower.
Yeah, yeah. You know,
Yeah.
I've often had conversations about why we paint the way we paint with my guests, and temperament has always been where I've gone. And this is a perfect example of that because you said you would have a hard time just perfectly rendering a flower against a gray background. And I think there are many artists that would agree with that, but then there are so many artists I've had in the podcast that do these incredible, intricate paintings that are absolutely pristine and precise. And but they clearly, or it just seems like they couldn't possibly have the same inner angst that you have, or they'd lose their minds, right? So I find it kind of refreshing that that art is to me at least it seems like it's so connected with our individual personalities that it's almost like we don't have to even try, just kind of let it happen.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, the intuitive process of working is something that I always pursue because if everything is planned out, then I don't f- I feel like the fun is kind of lost a little bit. Like there's no room for error, right?
Right.
We do the drawing, then we transfer it, then we paint, and we're painting in a certain way, and the background has to be, a certain way to make the foreground feel more like virtuous, and the lighting needs to always be 45-degree angle and from natural light because that's pure, and then we start almost putting ourselves in a cage. Like it has to be this way every single time. Every single thing has to be perfect. But then I find I find that when you look at like Sargent, for example, it's like some of those figures are frontally lit. Some of those figures are outside. Some of those
Hmm.
figures are in a lighting scenario that would probably be a nightmare to someone in like an academic setting.
Not to
So
mention they're 10 heads tall half the time.
yeah, yeah, they're like idealized.
Yeah, big
Uh,
time.
yeah, I just find that yeah, the sense of play, it can also be done in a like a really like good quality sort of fashion. Um, if you're taking risks with maybe the setup, right? Like you could paint it virtuos like in a virtuous way. Um, but it's like, what if this time the lighting was coming from the side or from below or from the back?
Hmm.
And I find that I've seen like I've seen that in your work, and that's what I really love about it. Like that painting that I told you I saw
Yeah.
in person. I was like, whoa, that backlit effect. Wow.
Thanks.
It's amazing. But yeah, and the re the reason why I moved to New York was actually because of these sort of painters that make these extremely high quality renditions of figures and still lifes and portraits, and I was just I've always just appreciated it so much that I had moved to New York primarily like only because of the atelier that I had gone to and that I'm teaching at now. And you know, Jacob Collins, he's the founder, and I would say he's one of my favorite sort of living artists today in the realism world, and I find that what they're doing, I can appreciate so much, just like the old masters, and that's something that's really important to me. So although although my head's kind of all over the place and I love abstraction, but I also love realism, uh, maybe even more than abstraction, and that it's such a big part of who I am
Hmm.
that to think otherwise, I would be neglecting probably the most important thing about my upbringing in art, which is just the appreciation of good technical ability.
So I have a question. So do you have limitations? I mean, your tastes are so broad. I mean, you kind of lost me on when you mentioned Duchamp. That would be where I would that would be where I would draw the line.
Right.
Like I'd be like,
Yeah,
oh, okay,
it's possible.
now you've gone too far. But but it's okay. I mean, we're all entitled to our own taste and opinions. But
Yeah.
so do you have a limit on to where it's just like, okay, now we're just getting ridiculous, or now on the modernist side, or now it's just getting stale, it's too representational, or as one of my guests recently put it, it's too much rendering, right? um do you have limits on either extreme in your personal taste?
No, I don't have limits in either extreme. In fact, when it gets like extremely rendered, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my, that's like almost CGI. That's like, well, I
I
get,
love
it's like hard to look at. It's like so rendered. I get giddy about it. I'm like, oh my gosh, um, like if I can only do a painting that's that rendered one day, and then sometimes I'll be like maybe I should just do like a little cast like on the side of my studio, and then I'll have like a deadline for an exhibition or something, and I'll say, oh, I can't at the moment. But I have like that other extreme of myself where I actually love when it's like extremely like so well done, that the work is like whoa, like that thing is like popping out of the canvas. But I like also when something is very abstract as well. And I have sat in front of a Rothko and got emotional. Like it's
Yeah.
not just this kind of like cliche, like, oh, you got emotional in front of a Rothko, that's a joke. Or
Yeah.
like I felt the same feeling that I would get, staring off into the ocean at night. Like
Yeah.
this sort of mystery of life is somewhere in there, and it made me feel all sorts of emotions.
But did
So
you get emotional staring at Duchamp's urinal? That's what I want to know.
I feel like Duchamp is more of like an appreciation of pushing the boundaries.
Yeah.
Uh, Speaking of which, when I was a first year in the Atelier, I had I was taking sculpture
Mm-hmm.
um, as well, and I learned how to make a release mold from scratch. And I was like, whoa, that release mold is this like crazy blue color. And so I made this rubber release mold from scratch and covered a sewing machine that it was given to me as a wedding gift, a sewing machine, because my friend knew that I would love to paint it one day. So I painted the sewing machine.
Okay, wait a minute. Someone gave you a sewing machine so that you could paint it. See, when I
Yeah,
got
yeah.
wedding gifts, they didn't give me like a toaster so I could paint the toaster. They actually thought I might make toast.
Might make toast with it. Yeah.
That's
No,
funny. You are a
yeah.
true artist.
I brought it all the way from San Francisco. I brought this huge sewing machine in my luggage all the way from San Francisco. Um, and I painted it, and I was like, okay, I've painted enough times. Now I want to, you know, cover it in this release mold and then paint it as this weird blue rubbery object that you could see a sewing machine under there kind of, but it's really just this like rubbery weird object with something underneath. And that's sort of like a that's like the Duchamp side of me. Like I'm gonna take the functionality out of this sewing machine so so that it could be appreciated as this sort of object that is beautiful, and that's it. Like it doesn't work anymore. The sewing machine has no function to it. It's just a sewing machine that's covered.
That's
Yeah.
incredible. Okay, I'm really glad we had this chat because I feel like I'm gonna try a little harder to be a little more open-minded. Because I mean, I love all kinds of work, but you have an incredibly broad appreciation, which I think is admirable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely hard to come by, especially in like the academic world.
Yeah.
Um, like completely open to everything, but no, yeah, I'm really open to everything. I met Jeff Koons and we had a long talk about the meaning of art, and he gave me really solid advice and wisdom about how I should just always create the work that I want to create, no matter what, even in the highs and the lows of my art career, that I should never give up on it. And I said, wow, this guy, he's like everyone around me in the academic world would um would just be like so against him and everything he's saying. But here I am just like realizing that he's a human. Like we're all human. We all have something, good about us in the world. And I found that he was like a really wholesome guy that had really good wisdom. He said like really amazing words to me, and I don't necessarily like his work so much, but
So there are limits.
yeah, there are limits. Yeah, there are limits. I would say I'm not a huge fan of of his work, like of like the like mega artists that are making millions. I would say David Hockney is one that I would appreciate. Um, and Jenny Seville, right? They're doing very well for themselves. But
Okay, I got to
yeah,
ask you though, what about David Hockney's what about his book that he wrote where he claims that anyone who draws well in the past was using a camera obscura?
well, I feel that in the past there was all sorts of tools being used, all
Right.
sorts of tools. Um, I would disagree that everyone was using Camera Obscura, but I would say that like in the past, if those artists had all the resources that we had today, they would be doing things differently, right? They
Right.
like some of those artists, first off, would be like a film director, right? Like they might not even be a painter. Or if they had the ability to use a camera obscura or a projector, maybe they'll use like a digital projector instead because it might be easier.
Right.
Like, but I do find that that there was all sorts of mechanisms that they were using, uh, sight size or uh, glass spheres that were like distorting and like painting through, like Hans Holbein, who was like painting through a distortion lens in order to put like symbolism in the work. And like all these distortion lens and like camera obscuras and sight size techniques, and there was like so many tools that were being utilized that that I find that they were using a lot of those things. But I also find that they had an ability to draw
Yeah.
that
I think that's
that
where it
wa-
falls apart because I think the whole premise of the book is that there's no way they could have drawn that well without the tools.
no, yeah, that
And
I
that's
just
that I come that because there are
I
people
don't
living
agree.
today that draw incredibly well without those tools. There are lots of us. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't necessarily agree with that. Especially since back then, like you would be under the wing of the great master at age 12. And
Mm-hmm.
by the time you were 17, you were this sort of beast of an artist, and you didn't have the distractions of social media
Yeah,
and
seriously.
those sorts of distractions. Like you were just in the studio, um, painting uh, for the great master, and then doing your own work after it was time.
Right, right.
So I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that there are many artists that have used all sorts of different mechanisms to help them draw better.
Right.
But I don't think they were a slave to it. I really feel like most of those artists could draw with or without it. Like
Yeah, I agree.
if Hans Holbein were to do a distorted skull in his work, I'm not sure if you know which painting I'm talking
I
about, but
do. Yeah, that's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. If he were to do a distorted skull from his head, I think he could still pull it off, but it would just take him much longer than if he was using a distortion lens.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
He'll pull it off.
Yeah,
It's Hans.
that's a trippy painting. Yeah. Well,
Yeah, that
okay,
painting.
we got to get to your work because I'm dying for
Oh, yeah.
people to see this. For those who haven't seen it, I'm excited to show it. It is just incredible. I
Oh,
absolutely love your
thank
work. Okay, so here's it's hard to even formulate a question. It's like my head is just full of this curiosity without any way of defining it. But okay, here's one question I have when I look at your work.
Yes.
You seem to manage to maintain the form, and you've talked about how you really appreciate painting form. You seem to manage it while literally globbing paint onto the figure that doesn't match the correct value, doesn't match the correct chroma or edges or any of the things that define form.
Yeah.
So, how are you creating? What are you doing to manage that challenge? Is it just trial and error?
Yeah. So what I usually think of as I'm painting is I'm thinking of the air behind the figure, and I'm thinking of things that can be floating in front of the figure at the same time. So, for example, like with the main figure, like on her torso, like near her belly button, there's like this really dark brushstroke to the right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, oh, all right. So
Oh,
like
okay.
that
Oh, right
really
here.
dark, yeah, that one. That one, so that brushstroke is sort of like floating in front of her, right? So I want I want a brushstroke to feel like it could be floating like a foot in front of a figure or 6 feet in front of a figure. I want a brushstroke to feel like instead of it floating in front of the figure, it's literally on top of the figure and a part of the form and a part of that experience of crawling around the form to where you're sort of like a sculptor. And I like to think of like this idea of like what if I was blindfolded and the only way that I could go around the figure is if I'm just tapping with my fingers and like landing on top of the form and like I'm tapping around and I'm blindfolded and that's the only way that I could paint is just by feeling my way around the form. And
Huh.
then what if this brushstroke were to break that and go in front of the form? What if a brushstroke were to create emptiness and replicate the color of the background? Or what if the background was just showing through entirely and it created a window into the background? So I want to create space behind the figure and in front of the figure, inside of the figure. And I also want to use arbitrary color. I want to use truthful color. I want I want to use arbitrary values and truthful values as well. I like to also think of just jamming everything that I like into a painting, even though it might be sort of it might have like too much variation or it might be too busy. That's just the kind of work that I like to produce. but yeah, they're actually this painting's called The Throne, and they're all sitting on top of a throne that's made out of electrical junk that I had photographed in San Francisco. I painted this painting and finished it this year. Uh,
Okay.
but they're all on top of this sort of weird like electrical junk, and it kind of looks like maybe they're like on a ship or something. Like there's like all sorts of different things that you could draw from it, but at the end it's back to Duchamp in a way. Like
Yeah.
they're sitting on top of this electrical equipment that has a function to it, and they're using this like electrical junk as a throne. Um,
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting because one of the things about abstract that I find so difficult is knowing where to start, where to finish. It's so non-objective.
mhm.
It's like a sport with no rules. It's like you're thrown out in the middle of this field with no goals and just some random balls, and they're just like, okay, now play. It's like, what? Play what? That's how abstract feels to me. But are you are are you taking these objects like this electrical pile of electrical equipment, and are you using that as a way to enter into this non-objective area of art to give you something like a starting point so that it's not completely arbitrary from the start?
It's different every time.
Really?
Uh, sometimes I like to go into the painting where I feel like I'm like juggling chainsaws,
Yeah.
right? Where
Yeah.
it's like, well, this is just a white canvas, and I am just gonna make something out of it, and later I'm gonna figure out what that is. But at the moment, I have no clue. So I have paintings like that. And I also have paintings where I'll collage on Photoshop. I have I have like the whole like Adobe Creative Cloud like on my
Yeah.
computer
Yeah.
stuff, but I find that it's too literal for me. So what I actually do is even though I have the paid version of Adobe Creative Cloud, I actually use the free version more. So on my phone, I have like a stylus and everything, and I'm just painting digitally and collaging using Photoshop Mix, Photoshop Fix, Photoshop Express, and Lightroom, and I'm just going back and forth between like Photoshop Fix and Photoshop Mix and back and forth, and the quality ends up being ridiculously bad
Hmm.
because it's just like it's just me taking a screenshot and then throwing it into like another program and doing a screenshot and then another program. And then by the time I'm done, I end up with this like pixelated kind of idea of how I want the painting to look. And I find that that sort of unclear way of working helps me then say, well, I have the choice to make this what it is or make it something else. It's pixelated enough for me not to be a slave to it. Because sometimes we zoom in on an eye and it's like, oh my gosh, we could see like this like crisp square highlight on the sclera that like looks exactly like the window
Yeah.
in the
Every
square.
last pane is
It's
showing.
like
Yeah.
yeah, it's like every pore is there. And I've never been one to like truly care so much about artists that like render every single pore.
Right.
Uh, I mean, I appreciate their work, of course, and some of their work I'm like, whoa, that's ridiculous. That's like really well done. But I've never been so keen to want to work that way myself, where
Right.
like every pore has like it's like a follicle is coming out of it, and there's like a highlight on the follicle. It's like it's like no, I just I just want to have some openness.
Yeah.
to the work. Yeah.
Hmm. Dang it. I was hoping that was the case because I'm so intimidated by the the lack of objectivity in modern or in abstract painting. Um,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah, tell me about this one. What was the inspiration for this painting?
So this painting's named The Forest, and I had done a painting when I was something like 9 years old. It was done with pastels, so I guess it wasn't technically a painting, but it was like colored pastels. And the work was called Mighty Forest, and it had a river and it had um like different sort of nature elements in it, but it was done from my head, so you couldn't really tell what it was. And I realized, although I wasn't at all looking at that work or even thinking of it, after I painted this painting, I looked at both of them side by side, the image of that painting that I did when I was 9 and this painting, and the composition was really similar, and there was like the same kind of river flowing through the work, like you could see it almost looks like there's like a river going through like underneath both of them in a way,
Mm-hmm.
from the top all the way to the bottom, and then maybe there's like a smaller stream to the very far right of the work coming through diagonally. And then the colors, like instead of like a nature green, it's more like I call it like Van Gogh's acid green, because Van Gogh made an interior work where it was like his bedroom, and it was done with an acid green, and no one wanted to buy it. Everyone thought it was an extremely distasteful color,
Hmm.
that and he wanted to use that to pay the rent,
And
and his
you
landlord.
thought that choosing a green that no one wanted to buy was a smart move?
Yeah, I mean, I really love this acid green color. Yeah, I thought it was a smart move. No, yeah.
I think it's great.
Again,
You're talking about this kind of mustard color right here, right?
yeah, yeah, that kind of mustard.
Yeah, okay.
It's like a yellow, and then at times it kind of becomes a little more like electric green, but it's
Yeah.
kind of like an ugly yellow, right?
Yeah.
But
I actually really
like
like that color.
yeah, I like it to be this like weird acid kind of color. And but yeah, again, I wasn't thinking of Van Gogh's bedroom, and I wasn't thinking of my work that I did when I was a kid. It those are things that I just, after I painted it, I was like, oh, maybe I was subconsciously thinking of Van Gogh, or maybe I was subconsciously kind of returning back to that scene that I made um as a kid. So yeah, it was something the connections, I look for them after I do the work. I don't look for the connections as I'm doing the work. As I'm doing the work, I'm following my intuition, and I'm trying to be as faithful to my intuition as possible. And there's a sort of sporadic quality to intuitive painting that a lot of people fear, because there are no set boundaries. There isn't any limitations. You're not painting within the lines, right? It's not a coloring book. It's not color by number. It's that you're coming up with a scene without knowing what the scene is at all. And
Hmm.
some people see this work as like they're standing up and like wind is flowing through her hair, and other people see it as they're laying down. I see it as laying down. Um, but
Hmm.
yeah, that's yeah. Oh,
It's
my
beautiful
head.
piece.
Thank you.
So this is great. Oh my goodness.
Oh,
There's
thanks.
these strokes down here. It's like what? I can't get my head around it. that you put all this work into this face and then you're like, I think I'll just put these three big purpley pink strokes in here. I mean, it works. But again, back to my original thought, it's just it takes a lot of guts.
Yeah, and also there was a lot of pressure involved with this painting because I did it from life in 3 hours. So it was
Hmm.
a alla prima. And if you're sort of breaking the picture plane and then painting it back in and destroying a part and then painting that part back in, you you end up saying, well, how much can I destroy and then reinvent, or like how can I pull this off in 3 hours, right? Whereas like if I'm doing a study and I'm like, I have 3 hours to make this really feel like a real person, and that's it. Um, I almost feel like, okay, I can go from point A to point B. It's like on some alla primas I fail, on some I can sort of pull it off. But when I'm doing my own work, my own style, my own voice, as an alla prima, it becomes this sort of thing where I just have to accept that this whole thing can just go completely wrong,
Hmm.
and embrace that. And I think when you lose the fear, you also lose the inner angst, and it starts to become that you're living in the moment, right? If I'm making like a stroke, like one of the strokes that like are on her shirt, where they're just like completely arbitrary, they're kind of going in and out of the picture plane in this sort of way. I As I'm doing it, I'm like in that moment as I'm creating it. I'm really experiencing that. Whereas sometimes when I'm doing a study, I find that it's like, oh, I've rendered things back and forth, beginning to end, uh so many times that I almost feel like I could like close my eyes and like make like a strip across the form to like express the volume.
Hmm.
Um so like it kind of gets me out of the headspace a little bit. But if I'm like, I want to make this thing feel real, but I also want it to feel like myself, then I have to be there for myself to create it. Whereas if I'm doing a work that isn't so much like myself, I can not show up. I can just be like an autopilot. Like I'm just gonna turn the form and not be present, and like if I follow every single rule in the rule book, I think I could pull it off.
Hmm.
And sometimes when I work that way, it kind of gets me out of the moment. It gets me out of being present. So I find that my work involves a sort of meditative state where it's like, whoa, that's an obnoxious brushstroke. Like I'm snapped back into reality, and then I make a passage of form, and I'm like, I think I could paint that passage of form better. It doesn't feel like it's capturing the form well enough, and I like keep really trying to investigate that, um, and all these sort of ways that I use to paint the same thing, it sort of causes me to live in different mindsets at the same time. Maybe it's from my my upbringing. I was born speaking two languages, like bilingual, Spanish and English, and I
Hmm.
always felt I'm like maybe trapped between two different
Yeah.
lives.
I actually
Um,
was going to ask you that question a while back if you were bilingual. Because
yeah,
I
yeah.
made that same connection that you are because you had said the term or the phrase speaking two languages earlier in our conversation, and I wondered that.
Yeah, so my parents and my big sister, they're from Argentina, and I was born in LA and my little sister in LA. So
Hmm.
so I always felt like I'm like part of two different worlds.
Hmm.
Like I don't have family in the United States anymore, and neither does my wife. Like with my family, they all moved back, and and my and my wife moved to the United States. So basically, I feel that I always felt that there was like this inner conflict of like who am I? Am I Argentinian or am I from the US? And I'm like, well, I'm clearly from the US because I was born in the US, but then also my parents really sort of raised me Argentinian. So then I just always felt like I'm living these two different worlds. So maybe there's some sort of tie in there where it's like I like bringing worlds together.
Yeah. Okay, that brings up a thought. So merging two worlds. I've seen, as you know, you'd mentioned that you like that painting of Juju.
Yeah.
And so you know that I've also tinkered with this abstract relationship to the figure. And
Hmm.
I mean, clear back in 2002, I was experimenting with it. I don't do much with it anymore, although I miss it. But
Yeah.
but I've always been drawn to it. And but one thing I found that was difficult is merging those two worlds in a seamless way. And I've seen lots of work out there, and I can't even think of an example right now, but you know, as you said in Instagram, you're constantly flooded with work. I've seen lots of people experimenting with this, some better than others, but oftentimes there's this disconnect between the realism and the abstraction, almost like the artist is painting an abstract painting and then slapping a figure on top of it. Or they'll paint an abstract painting, slap a figure on top of it, smear a few strokes through the face, call it done. And there's this disconnect between the two worlds. I'm not seeing that
Right.
with yours at all. Like yours seem really cohesive. So have you developed, first of all, have you thought much about this, or are we going back to intuition again? Is this entirely intuition? And if you have thought about it, have you come up with certain rules or devices that prevent you from making that mistake where these two worlds sort of feel in conflict with one another?
Yeah, and I know exactly what you mean. And on the flip side, there's also like the realism painter who like breaks an edge, and at the very ending of the painting, it's like, oh, I just broke an edge. Like
Yeah.
like that was intense. Like I just broke the edge, and it was like after I painted the whole painting. I did it. I got it over with. Now it's a little bit more expressive. So there's like the flip side where you know it might not feel expressive if it's done in a certain way that's not part of the process, right? Because if you
Right.
paint the whole painting and you break an edge, it's not a part of the process. That's not necessarily how you constructed the work. And I
Oh my God.
find that
This is like music to my ears. What you're saying. I don't mean to cut you off, but I've
oh
thought
yeah,
so
yeah.
much about this stuff. Go ahead and finish your thought.
Of course. I feel like if it's genuine, then that means that using you're using whatever elements, whatever abstraction or realism, or whatever techniques that you have to construct a painting. If it's genuine and you're constructing the painting using the things that you really feel interest you and are truthful to you, if that's the way that you're making the painting, I feel like that's how it's going to end up being you. But if you make an abstract work and you smudge the face because you don't necessarily have the technical ability to like paint a face, and you're like, okay, if I smudge the face, then there's no way that they'll find that out. I think that's not being so truthful to oneself, unless if you know that method really is what you're going after, and it couldn't be any other way. But then also, like the flip side where I was saying painting the whole painting and then breaking an edge. So I feel like constructing the whole painting in the way that you feel is most truthful to yourself, that is when you get the outcomes that you're looking for. But if you're painting out of a place of fear, where it's like, well, if I'm painting expressively or loosely, and I'm scared and I'm fearful to make these brushstrokes, and it doesn't feel right, then maybe it's not you. Maybe it means that you are actually one that should express the world in a more virtuous manner, or someone's abstract and they feel like elements are missing from the work and they want to bring in some more realistic elements into the work. I feel like if they really struggle with it and they're like, okay, I'm just gonna mess around with the face until it looks good. I also feel like something in there is possibly it's possibly limiting, where maybe they should explore the foundations to understand how to paint a face, and then maybe the face is going to be all abstract, but there's going to be some sort of elements in there that can demonstrate that they're having a good time doing this, that they're not suffering because of a lack of ability. So yeah, I find that process is key. Like if you're suffering during the process, you're not having a good time and you're being fearful to break an edge or to be too loose, or vice versa, to be too realistic. I think all those limitations that we set on ourselves, they can cause us to not make the type of work that truly makes us who we are. So I like variation, and I appreciate so many different types of artwork. And to be truthful to myself, I almost feel like I need to pay homage to um, all the art that I love and everything that interests me. And then I just paint intuitively without thinking of other painters or anything. I don't have any reference material like on the walls of anything that can influence me. I like to just paint completely from an intuitive, empty sort of place where the subconscious guides me rather
Mm.
than the conscious thought guides me. I've seen artist studios where like all over the walls are like magazine cutouts and different paintings that they enjoyed, and they printed out the images, and I find that that's a wonderful way to work as well. But I just don't have any sort of influence inside of my painting studio of 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 any sort of fashion or installation or anything,
Hmm.
so that I could just paint from a place of purity, so I could try to find myself in the painting rather than Frankensteining other artists into it.
Okay.
Which is valid, you
Yeah, I
could
mean, we all do that to
Frankenstein.
some degree, right? We're all, I mean, obviously you've named some of your influences. I've got influences. So let me
Yeah,
see if I understand you correctly. So I don't, I'll be honest with you. I don't love this answer because I was hoping for the secret to painting.
yeah.
Um, but what I think I'm hearing you say is that if you're not being completely authentic or completely um, genuine in every stroke that you put down in making a decision, a design decision, and some sort of aesthetic decision that is completely your own, you're just going to be cutting and pasting different styles together and it's going to feel somewhat contrived.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it feels contrived if you're being very literal about Frankensteining styles,
Right.
uh, but it'll also feel very contrived if you have such a fear of expression, um, that when you attempt it when it's most safe. Or
Yeah. Okay.
on the flip side, you attempt realism while you're doing abstraction because it feels most safe to do it in a certain manner where like the ears and the silhouette of the head are painted very well, but then all the facial features are just like buffed out. Or
Right.
not that there's anything wrong with that, but I mean, if you're doing it from a place of fear, like, oh, I'm gonna mess out something that I don't know how to paint well, but I wish I could,
So
or I
using
want to
abstraction to hide your weaknesses is what you're
to
saying.
hide your weaknesses. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're doing it to hide your weaknesses, then that's not truthful to yourself.
Right.
If you're doing it because you're not hiding your weaknesses, then more power to you. And also if like if you're doing abstraction only when it's the most safest time to do it as a realism painter, then maybe you're not being yourself either. Uh, but again, anything in art goes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that could be the right way to work for you also.
Yeah.
But
I know.
I like to question that. I like to question process because if I mean, yes, I was in art school for 11 years, but of course, I didn't fully resolve how to paint a figure uh, all the way to the point that I wanted to paint a figure, right? And same with abstraction. I studied under abstract painters, many. I took night classes in abstraction while I was at the atelier. And I didn't fully explore that either, all the way to the extent that I would want to, because of course in realism you could take a whole lifetime in just trying to figure out how to paint something really well and make a beautiful artwork just by doing that. And also with abstraction, to investigate that your whole life could be a whole life's journey. So at some point, we have to say, okay, we can investigate the things that we love, and that's going to take a whole lifetime, of course. Um, but to like take the plunge and not to be scared of it is such an important part of making the artwork we want to make. I find that there's so many artists out there that talk to me about their fears, and I could truly feel how they're limiting themselves. I hear animators or or people that are illustrators that feel like they're not making the types of paintings that they want to make, and I'm like, just do what feels virtuous. If that means that you're going to put illustration inside of your paintings, then go for it. And I'll get answers like, well, I always wanted to do that, but I never thought that it could be possible. And it's like, we only have one life. So
Yeah.
so just kind of, if you love illustration and you love painting, mix them. Or if you like animation and you like painting, mix them. If you like abstraction and you like realism, you can mix that too. Um, I've heard I've had uh, people that make beautiful renditions of the natural world in such an authentic way, um, that and like like such a truthful way that I'm like, wow, no one can really like I can't really put my finger on just how impressive that is. And then they'll tell me, well, I actually always wanted to explore a little bit outside of my comfort zone, and I was thinking of doing different subject matter. I was thinking of making something a little bit looser, or I was thinking of doing narrative painting. And all of a sudden, like it's like this artist is like truly coming out and telling me in a very vulnerable way all like the sort of inner angst and fears of exploring
Mm-hmm.
and playing with art. And I'm just like, you have to really go for it. So some of these artists, it's like they've been painting for like 50 years. And it's
Yeah.
like and they'll tell me like that they feel these things, and I'm like wow, like I was feeling that last week. Like, and they're feeling this 50 years into painting. So what I could say is that you know you want to really just do anything you possibly can to create a little bit of a stir. If you feel too comfortable, if you're in the water and you're ankle deep, maybe you should be in the water shoulder deep, even if that feels a little bit strange and a little uncomfortable. Because painting to be safe, I don't quite think is why we paint. I think we paint because first off, we're obviously all we all have some sort of little rebellion towards the system because
Mm-hmm.
we have a very strange, freelance kind of way of living that is very different from the safe profession. So if we have an unsafe profession, then why try to turn it into something that's safe? If that was the reason why, we went into it from the beginning. So then I just try to be the kid inside that says, well, I'm gonna try to make this thing unsafe and see what happens. And I have so much more fun when it's unsafe. Because at the end of the day, you put the painting on the gallery wall, and probably the painting that you disliked the most is the one that sells first.
I know you can
So
never
just
tell. You
be
can never
yourself.
tell. Well, so just to be clear, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not saying be a little unsafe for the sake of being different or making a statement. You're saying it for in order to push yourself to uncomfortable places and explore your own potential. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. If you do one thing and you're really good at it and that's all you want to do for the rest of your life, but there's some curiosity in you that wants to explore otherwise, I feel like you should explore it. And so that's why I really do feel like in painting, I prefer to try everything that isn't me so that I could find out what me is. Because if I find out that I can set up a model on a stand and I can make a, a sort of study of that figure and I can really figure it out. Um, and I want to just do that for the rest of my life. I find that, first off, I think that's an amazing journey to have, but I would want to have that journey only if I've tried everything else and realized that everything else is not who I am, and I whittle it down until I finally end up with who I am. So I feel like I've tried so many different things that I've kind of whittled everything off until I found out sort of who I am. And I of course I don't know who I am entirely, and we never know who we are. It's like it's also a life journey, but I have bumped into people where they're like, they're like, "Oh, I thought you were I thought you were like a retired artist or something." Because
Yeah.
I've gone through so many phases in my life as a painter. They're like I thought you were retired already because it seems like you figured something out and that you were sick of something else and like you ended up at this. And it's like I ended up at it because I tried to expedite the process, I feel. I tried to expedite the process of it's like maybe it took Turner 30 years, but I just want to be myself now. That's how I
But
felt.
this may not be where you end up too.
This, this is probably not, it's probably not going to be where I end up.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. I could just go full circle, or I could go in waves, or I could end up somewhere else completely. I could end up being an installation artist. I don't know. I have no
Yeah.
clue.
I can't wait to
But
see where you go because you have evolved a lot in your short time as a student and painter. You know, and the other thought I had when you were talking is what if 'cause we as artists, we always talk about authenticity and being who we are. And I know all those things I think are valuable to talk about. But what if who we are, or at least who you and I are, um, is anything we want to be? You know, because you
yeah.
talked earlier about how you have all of these interests, and you've wanted to explore all of them. I've had a similar experience where every day I wake up in the morning and I think about 50 different things that I want to do that day, and they're all different mediums, different, different projects, different, you know, what have you. And
Yeah.
it's almost like at some point I realized I just need to pick something. Like just need to,
Hmm.
I like all of this stuff and I just need to pick something because there isn't just one right answer. Have you come to that
Exactly.
place yet, or is that just me?
Uh, you know, sometimes I'm scatterbrained and I have all these different ideas,
Yeah.
and I have this process of getting them out to the canvas to where it's sort of like process of elimination where the image that is inside of my head, if it lasts the longest, then that's the one I'm going to paint.
Okay.
And
That's, I
that's
have
the
the same experience. Yeah.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. Yeah. The one that sticks. It's like when
The
you're going
one
to
that
buy something expensive. My wife always says, just sit on it for a little while. It's like, and then if you're still interested in a week, then buy it.
That's exactly it. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly it. I feel the same way. It's like you have all these things floating around in your head, and yeah, it's like after a certain point, you're like, oh, wait a second, I actually liked that work because I like that the artist that makes similar work to that, but that's not me, and I don't feel that that's who I am, and I don't feel like I want to make a painting that looks like that. I just like work that looks like that, but it's not the work that I want to make. So I wouldn't like it if
Yeah.
I made work, but I would like it if the artist that I like made that work. Um,
Yeah.
so so then the process of elimination, it's like then the work that is more true to yourself sort of stays, and that's when you feel like, okay, then we have to do this. We have to get this out of our system and like onto the canvas.
Yeah. You have wisdom beyond your years because I think I'm like 20 years older than you and you've got a lot of this stuff figured out I'm still working on. But I'm embarrassed to admit this, but when I discovered Kim Jong-gi, it's sad to see
Oh
that he's
yeah.
gone. But when I discovered him a few years back, I was like obsessed, which is so
Yeah.
far removed from what I do. And I found myself trying in sketchbooks to draw out of my head the way Kim Jong-gi could do it. And I can't do it. Not like, no, who can draw like him? I mean, is there anybody?
I
I
don't
don't know.
know. It's ridiculous.
But I was obsessed for probably 6 months or something in becoming like Kim Jong-gi. And
Yeah.
then at some point I realized I just need to stick with something. Like
Yeah.
I just need to keep going in the direction I'm going and stop trying to be everything and anything at the same time. So that's why I
Yeah.
asked that question. Kind of, you put it perfectly, scatterbrained. I guess that's a good description.
Yeah, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And I actually right now at the moment I'm in a sort of phase where um I have this idea to make little sculptures of flowers
Mm-hmm.
and paint from them, and also include the flowers like inside of a diptych kind of format, where I have the painting next to a diptych of flowers that are hand sculpted. Um, and that has lasted in my head for about a month now. So I feel like it's about time for me to manifest that. So yeah, it's this thing where it's like, well, if I do that, am I gonna still be who I am? And I feel like I feel like I will. But yeah, I wonder. It's like yeah, Kim Jung-gi. Like I was when I was taking illustration classes in San Francisco, like that was like the primary person that I was looking at. It was like, whoa, this guy's ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
wow, the perspective, and it's like he's like rendering like these like scrunched up soda cans like on the sidewalk. Like not rendering, but like he's like doing this like amazing line work and like all the things in it. It just feels like he like really figures out these worlds and does them from their head, um, from his head. And I feel like, yeah, who knows? Maybe there's a little bit of that in your work,
Yeah.
and you want who
Yeah.
knows?
I had to try it for 6 months before I realized I'll never be Kim Jong Il. And you
Yeah,
know, and that's not to say that I'm down. I'm not saying that from a negative place. Like I can't be as good
right.
as him. But it took me 6 months to realize that I'm not him and that's not where I need to be. But I know sometimes, I guess, like you said earlier in the conversation, you just need to try everything
Everything,
to
yeah,
know who you are.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good advice, actually. So now I don't feel so bad about getting hung up on Kim Jong-gi for 6 months.
No, yeah, it's like you wouldn't understand that you're this much in your own shoes now had you not gone through the experience
Right.
of maybe not being yourself for a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Perhaps the
Yeah.
danger is not going outside of what you're doing ever. So you have no room to grow.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Then you've never even tried on your own shoes. You're just wearing everyone else's shoes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man. Well, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Undraped Artist Podcast. If you enjoyed it, subscribe. And if you could, leave a comment or review. That really helps the channel. Please share the show with your friends, and if you're feeling generous, consider a monthly donation at theundrapedartist.com. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next week.